Wow. First of all, I just loved and admired Ivan Allen Jr. so much. I had the good fortune to know him, not super well, but fairly well, and his son Ivan Allen III as well. And I just thought they were terrific, terrific people. And having received this award has a very special meaning for me because I admired them so much. And I also want to thank those at Georgia Tech on the board or whoever that selected me. I just want to, whoever you are, thank you. I want you to know this is greatly appreciated. I think we're going to have a 10-minute Q&A after I've got 15 minutes, and I'll use it as judiciously as possible and try not to go beyond the allocated time, which has put us out of here right on time. And you know, when you're running a news network and a sports team, when you say the game's got to start at 7:30 or the news has got to go on at 8 o'clock, it's got to go on at 8 o'clock. I mean, I'm a great believer in time. In fact, one reason that I've been divorced 3 times is I just couldn't stand my wife being late all the time, you know. I didn't leave there, but I just sat there tapping my toe, waiting, come on, we gotta go, we can't be late, you know. That's just one of the things. But basically, what really has driven me nearly nuts over the years is people doing stupid things. I mean, when it's really not that much harder to do the smart thing and the right thing. And when I started CNN, before that, I really didn't feel like I had much influence over events, so I followed them peripherally. But I knew there were problems in the world, and I did study them to a degree, but when you don't have the power to change things, what's the point of spending your time and effort on them? Why not concentrate in areas where you can make a difference? Like, I was being interviewed earlier today, and somebody asked me, he said, you know, what should the Braves do about this, and what should CNN do about that? I said, hey, that's not my problem anymore. I mean, you know, what they ought to do is whatever the right thing. I said, I'm not there anymore. And I said, you know, I spent 25, 30 years with them. I went to every game. It's good that Arthur Blank now has to worry about sports, you know. At least I never had anybody that was dogfighting, you know, thank God. We had every other thing happen. But I enjoyed it at the time, but now I've moved on. And basically, in 1980, when I started seeing, I said, okay, Turner, you're going to set the policy for this news network. The first thing, and you want CNN to make a difference, not just report news and make money, although I wanted to do both of those things too. But why not take a position on the important issues and try and, first of all, define what the great problems facing humanity are, since you're going to be a global news network, and then have your news network see if they can change things and help solve, be involved in the solving of those problems. And I sat down. It didn't take long because, like, I was a student of history and an avid follower of news and current events, and I wrote down the list of what the big problems were. The 3 biggest problems in the world in 1980 were the Cold War and the possibility of nuclear war. The second one, as I saw it, was tied with the third. The second one was population. It was clear to me that if the human population keeps going, that there's just not going to be enough room or enough resources for all of us. Eventually, because the Earth is finite and the number of people can be infinite, you can't put an infinite number of anything in a finite environment and say, go to it, baby, you know, and have as many children as you want to. When I was born in 1938, there were 2 billion people in the world. Today, there's 6.5 billion. In 70 years, the population of human beings has increased 3.5 times. That's without precedent for anything. The number of elephants is down by over 90%. And the number of gorillas and just about all the other forms of life, almost, except maybe rats and cockroaches, which live with us, have violently decreased while we increased. And we can't, it's projected that we're within the next 15 years, we're going to get to close to 8 billion. But we're not, if we do, already 2 billion people are living in abject poverty. I'm headed up for the United Nations. I'm speaking there at the General Assembly tomorrow. And I can tell you, no matter what we do with global warming and all of our other problems, if we don't get serious about family planning and stabilize our population, we should really cut it down. There's a simple solution that I dreamed up. We should voluntarily, I don't believe in, we should mimic China to a degree and have one-child family for 100 years, voluntarily, all over the world. And that way we would cut down to approximately 2 billion people, which is really probably the right amount of people for the world to live at a decent standard of living in a totally sustainable way where we're not encroaching on the capital base of the environment the way we are today. We're headed for absolute disaster, just like we're having economic disaster now because of the subprime and the credit and our financial institutions, the mess that they've gotten in by acting stupid, doing stupid things like lending people more money on a house than it's worth. I mean, how dumb can you be? I mean, duh. And this is Merrill Lynch and all these big firms. What's the one that went bankrupt last week or sold for $2, used to be $100. I mean, and that was what drove me nuts and why I resigned from the Time Warner board. I said, when I got on that board, I said, because the reason that I got rich before I merged with Time Warner is because we did the smart things and didn't do the dumb things. And I said that at the board. I said, if we want to get this company going instead of, and it's still a mess, I said, if we want to get this company going, we got to start making smart deals and not making dumb deals. But you know what? The board didn't get it. I swear to God. I mean, they didn't even know what they were doing. I mean, we had a board that nobody on the board had any media experience, and it was a media company. Nobody but me. I said, I'm not going to, there was not a single journalist on the board. When I proposed that we put some people on the board that understood the business, the management didn't want that because they liked having a bunch of very smart Harvard professor types that didn't know squat about the media business because it was easy to keep your job and get your $10 billion a year in bonuses and everything if the board doesn't know what's going on, you know, because they don't understand it. But that's not a good way to run a company, I can tell you. You want people that know what they're doing. You don't want, I know you're going to be a college professor at the Smithsonian, but it's pretty similar, you know, you'll be fine. All right. Okay. All right, so the first thing was that let's end the Cold War, and that looked doable. And when the Olympic boycotts and the Goodwill Games, I spent a lot of my time in Russia. I must have gone there 30 times during that period. And I went over there to make friends with everybody. I remember a KGB agent went with me on a trip out to the countryside, and we sat down in the evening. He said, Turner, why are you being so friendly with us? He said, you're the Goodwill Games. You're going to spend $40 million helping improve U.S.-Soviet relations. He said, what are you doing? And I said, Yuri, let me tell you, his name was Yuri. I said, I love my country, and I love my children, and all my neighbors and all the other children in the United States. And I said, and I've studied this situation, and I said, I think the United States and the Soviet Union are either going to live together or we're going to die together because of our nuclear weapons. Sooner or later, something's going to go wrong. And I said, we've got to end this Cold War because me loving my country and my children means I've got to love your country and your children too, because we're either going to go together or we're going to go to hell. And he said, and this went straight to the top Soviet leadership. This is what Turner thinks. And they came back to me and they said, you know, that makes sense, you know? That means we got to like you. He said, we've hated you all these years. We did just this great job. On television, all you saw was the Soviets marching at Red Square and the missiles and tanks coming through the square and these stern guys up in the viewing stand in front of Lenin's tomb. You know, but then they were showing pictures of us with our 4th of July parades doing the exact same thing. So we were doing everything we could to demonize each other instead of humanize each other. And we're still doing it today. The United States official policy, it looks like to me, backed by the military-industrial complex, how are we going to spend $500 billion a year on the military unless we have enemies. And so they're trying to make Russia and China into enemies right now, again. I mean, it just really makes me angry because we've made so much progress. They want to be our friends. I spend a lot of time in both places, and I can tell you, and they don't want to die either. I mean, one thing that we all have in common, and we have a lot of things in common. So anyway, end the Cold War. All right. And then the other two things were population and environment, okay? Those were the three main issues. And I put millions of dollars and continue to into population and environment, and I put millions of dollars, many millions, into now what we have to do. The Cold War's over. We've got to get rid of the nuclear weapons. The war in Iraq was mainly about nuclear proliferation, really. I just figured this one out. I didn't read that anywhere because we thought that Saddam Hussein was working on nuclear weapons. We had bad information because he wasn't. And you shouldn't go to war on bad information. I mean, you ought to be absolutely sure. It's before you shoot somebody and kill them. You ought to be sure that they've done something wrong, you know. You just don't go around shooting everybody. First of all, in most places, it's illegal. You know, most places, you'll be convicted of murder when you kill people that really are relative. You know, Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, but the world's full of bad guys. You just can't go out and bomb every one of them, or we'll be bombing everybody, you know. There are certain people that don't like Mexicans, you know. They're our neighbors, for Christ's sake. I mean, you know, all they're looking for is a job. Anyway, it's hard to kill somebody that just wants a job, you know. All he has is a pair of sneakers and some worn-out jeans. Anyway, all right, we've got to get rid of nuclear weapons. Now our big problems are getting rid of nuclear weapons. Secondly is stopping global warming before it's too late, and that's going to require most complicated thing. Getting rid of nuclear weapons is easier than stopping global warming. And when I speak to you, I'm going along with Sam Nunn and Bill Perry and Henry Kissinger and Secretary of State George Shultz, who have called for total nuclear disarmament. Thank you, Sam, for your leadership position on that. And then Gorbachev came out a couple of weeks later in the same Wall Street Journal and also agreed 100%. And called for nuclear disarmament too. That's the only way. Otherwise, you can't have. It's okay for Israel to have 100 nuclear weapons, but it's not okay for Iran to have 2. How can you have a double standard? Who's going to be the one that decides? We've got to either we all have them at the end of the day, or nobody has them. That's the only way, and that's the safe thing too. Because just remember, only 6 months ago, one of our B-52s took off from I believe it was Nebraska, the bases up there, and flew down to Texas on the coast with 6 armed, ready-to-fire nuclear weapons on board that they didn't even know were on board. They thought they were putting the dummies in, and the dummies put the live ones in by mistake. The pilots and nobody on the plane knew it. I mean, we're just so lucky we haven't had a nuclear catastrophe already. And then the second thing that happened just a few weeks ago was in the papers, is that by mistake they sent some really good up-to-date nuclear triggers to when is South Korea by Taiwan by mistake. You know, I mean, and no wonder the Chinese are mad. Here we are, you know, like the Khan guy over in Pakistan. We're sending out nuclear stuff all over, and we don't even know it. You know, they're shipping the wrong stuff. I mean, it's just, you know, and with as much as we tried to do about airline safety, an airliner crashes somewhere in the world every week. You know, somewhere one goes down. I mean, we shouldn't have anything as dangerous as nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert with our president, whose wisdom is kind of questionable. I think that's fair to say. A lot of people question how smart he is. And he's got a nuclear trigger. He can push the button, it's all over, you know, in an afternoon. And I just don't think we want to do that to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and even our children. I mean, don't they deserve to have the same wonderful kind of life that we have? This world is too good a place and too much fun to destroy it. You know, that would not be a smart thing to do. That's about the dumbest thing we could possibly do, is blow ourselves up, you know, particularly when the worst we have to do is maybe get a little smaller houses and smaller cars than we had in the past to get by. And I'm right on time. That's all. I will close by issuing the same statement that's going to be on my tombstone. I have nothing more to say.
But as is our tradition, the very first question has been prepared by the Ivan Allen College Student Advisory Board. And so they have given that to me already. And it says, we often hear and appreciate the contributions and donations of individuals working to ensure a better future for our world. However, more often than not, these philanthropists are in the latter stages of their lives. What would you say is the most effective method for younger and less financially able people to work towards bettering our common future? So anyway, what can the young folks do?
That don't have a lot of money? I get asked that question all the time. Well, one thing you can do is like I did on my walk around the building, and I live in downtown Atlanta, and my windows are out too. My God. So, and anyway, there's a lot of glass downtown. But I pick up trash when I walk around, and everybody can do that. You don't have to be wealthy. And the other thing you do is be politically active and vote for smart people and not for dumb ones.
Do we have another question? They're looking through. Okay, thank you. And then, so I think what he's saying here is that you suggested that no nukes would be a good idea, that if we all gave up our nuclear capabilities. What about nuclear power in the United States?
Good question. Nuclear power, I think we probably are going to have some nuclear power. I would rather see us use wind and solar, but it's so far behind, we'll probably have to have, I'd rather have a nuclear power plant than a coal burning plant, even though they're both dangerous. Coal, we know, is going to kill us. Nuclear just might. So it's, you know, it's still dangerous as hell. We haven't figured out what to do with it, but I'm not, you know, I'm begrudging it, but I'd rather see us put most of our emphasis on wind and solar, and that's where I'm putting mine.
And I would say we are having discussions today at the Sam Nunn Bank of America Forum about the emerging nuclear power energy initiative and how to keep that safe in the light of the current global situation. Okay, a question that has come from the audience is, all things considered, are you more optimistic or pessimistic than you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Well, I'm worried. When I speak and have a little time, I liken the human situation to a baseball game. And I said, it's the seventh inning and we're down by a run. You know, that's where humanity is. And the game's not over. You know, we've got to hold them right where we are and put 2 runs on the board in the last 2 innings. If we do that, we'll be fine. If we do the smart things, we'll make it come through with flying colors. If we're a bunch of dummies, we'll die, and we deserve to.
Okay. Are you personally doing anything with Iran or North Korea?
I am with North Korea. I was there last year and met with the big cheeses, and mainly I'm working on peace up there and to get the DMZ made into a peace park and World Heritage Site and be protected once the war between the Koreas is officially over, which, of course, it's still going on. They've each got 1 million troops on the border, including, I think, 30,000 American troops that have been there for 50 years, just sitting there, costing us billions of dollars a year to do nothing.
Okay, someone asks, while population growth is a concern, isn't the greater issue the problem of consumption? How should we address this problem?
Sure, we could have 10 billion people on Earth if they didn't consume anything or hardly anything. If the average person lives like the average Somalian, you know, with nothing, we can have 10 billion people. But if we're going to have 2 billion people having cars and flying to Florida for vacations and having the kind of life that Western Europe and the United States have come to enjoy, then we need to have about 2 billion people to do it on a sustainable basis. But you know, the more people you have, the less you have for each one. So consumption is a problem, but we like to consume. You know, don't we? Anybody here? I mean, I try to consume less. You know, I only have one airplane. You know, it's and I try not to use it anymore. But I got to get to New York this evening, so I'm headed straight from the airport.
Someone asked, and you may not want to answer this, but the question is, whom do you support for president?
Well, all three of the candidates have now officially said that they're for total nuclear disarmament. Am I right with that, Sam? Close. Okay, close. They're close. I'm probably going to vote for the one at the end of the day that cares about my three areas: nuclear disarmament, environment, and family planning.
Okay, another topic that's hot in this election, although not as hot as it was because there's been some coalescence around this too. What are your thoughts on immigration, especially from neighboring countries such as Mexico?
It's a tough one. It's a really, really tough one because it really is. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be almost impossible to stop, whether it's legal or illegal. And I would like to see, I don't like to see us building a wall along the U.S. border with Mexico. I remember President Reagan, one of, I think, his best moments when he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And here we are building it without even given a lot of consideration. I just got back from Israel not long ago, and they're building a wall around the West Bank. It doesn't look good. It looks like a big step backwards. So I really like to see people be able to travel back and forth. But until we solve the population problem and get a handle on it, immigration is going to be a fact of life, whether illegal or legal, because somebody that's starving and living in a place where there's no food or not enough is going to move to somewhere where there is food. And that's true of animals or people. And we'd better get a handle on our population growth, or it's going to continue to get even worse.
I think you've begun to answer this question, but this one reads, does greed have anything to do with making dumb decisions?
Sure.
Would you care to elaborate? Okay. Do you support the vision of the Millennium Development Goals?
Absolutely. I think we have to share with those. You can't have a world where 10% of the people have 90% of the wealth and expect that to be sustainable over the long term. The people in the developing world know what we've got, and they know what they don't have. And if we don't make an effort to square it up a little bit, that's one reason why I gave my $1 billion to the UN, so it would go into the poorest part of the world to help even things up a little bit. I had more than I needed, and most Americans have the opportunity at least to get a decent job. I know, I have a restaurant company, and we employ 3,000 people that didn't have. We created 3,000 new jobs right here in the United States. It's not the same thing as being a graduate of Georgia Tech for the most part, but it's a decent job, and you get a break on food.
Speaking of graduates of Georgia Tech, somebody wonders, what is the best piece of advice you believe a graduate student from Tech should know?
Well, graduate anywhere, when I get asked that question, I answer it this way. Early to bed, early to rise, work like hell, and advertise.
Well, I think that we see now why the final question that people asked was, why don't you run for president?
I'm gonna answer that question and then finish with a little poem. We started with a poem, and by God, I'm gonna finish with one. It's short, but basically, why don't I thought about running for president several times. First of all, I don't have any experience in government. That was number one. But secondly, when I was married to Jane the last time, I really thought about it seriously when I was still young enough, about 10 or 15 years ago, and she said she was married to one candidate for the Senate, Tom Hayden, and she knocked on every door in California and he got crushed. She said, I've had my political life. She said, if you run for president, you do it without a wife. And at the time, I didn't want to get another divorce, so I stuck with her, and hell, you know, she left anyway, so. Now I finish with my poem.
Oh, your poem, yes.
This is a poem. Well, first, I'm going to do two. You did two. They're short, though, very short. The first one is about honor, okay? And it comes from Shakespeare, I think Richard II or Richard III. My honor is my life, we live in one. Take honor from me, and my life is done. Then pray, my liege, my honor let me try. For that I live, and for that will I die. That's one. That's the best one I ever read about honor. And the next one is about courage, and it comes from Macaulay's Horatius at the Bridge. Then stepped forward Horatius, the captain of the gate. He said, to every man of woman born, death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Hew down the bridge, Sir Counsel, with all the speed ye may. I, with but two beside me, will hold the foe in play. On yon narrow span 1,000 might well be stopped by 3. Now who will stand on either hand and guard the bridge with me? Thank you.